Hey, Alex.
Hey, Patrick.
I gave that response 2 stars.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't put nearly enough effort into it, and honestly, that was a little bit of a buggy introduction. So,
Well, actually, Google Hangouts Google Hangouts helps us in that regard.
yeah,
Watching our morning show on Google Hangouts is akin to playing a brand new Assassin's Creed game, or at least Unity. Unity is much more of a mess than any of these other games have ever been.
yeah. From a technical standpoint, definitely. As much as I disliked three, I felt like that was much more because of the game's design and story, and to basically just all everything about that game kind of sucked, even though it all kind of worked the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Unity is much more of a technical disaster, which is really unfortunate because there are parts of that game I kind of liked a little bit, and I probably could have liked more if I wasn't constantly struggling against it to be able to play it.
Hmm. So is that all? Is that all you did this week? We did the morning show on Tuesday. Kind of finished that out. Did some quick looks with Vinny, but otherwise was mostly trying to finish that beast, put it to bed.
Yeah, I tried to take my time a little bit more with it because there is the sometimes I think very correct criticism that when you are playing games like that for review, there is a tendency to want to try and rush through them. So I wasn't going to be done in time for the embargo, but I also didn't want to completely burn myself out before I reviewed it. So I spent a little bit of time while I was playing the way I would normally, which is to say, if I saw a random side mission, I would go do that. I would just kind of follow the map around and just see where I would end up and do stuff. And so I ended up, probably sinking a solid like 30 hours, 35 hours into that game before I ended up writing the review. But yeah, that ended up taking a lot of my time, and I spent all of yesterday trying to put those thoughts into something kind of coherent review-like, and the result is up on the site now. I ended up giving it 2 stars. It is not a horrible game, but it is an extremely disappointing one.
Yeah, I think that certainly plays into it. This idea that it was the first, you know, next gen slash current gen Assassin's Creed, and I it doesn't even on those merits accomplish what it was setting out to do. I don't
No.
I don't think I have not found in the 4 or 5 hours that I've put into it this week that if it was just a hardware showcase, hey, the reason we ditched the previous generation hardware was for X, Y, and Z. I don't think this game even begins to make the case why that's interesting. The crowds, there are more of them. There
Yeah.
are more people, but there are no systems. There's no dynamic AI. There's no evolution of what any of that stuff means, except that additional processing power allowed them to put more of them on the screen. And it's different than, say, it seems like they did exactly what Capcom did with Dead Rising 3, right? So Dead Rising 3, the big change really is just, holy shit, there were thousands of zombies on screen at once. But that's a game in which the weapons you have, the vehicles you're interacting with, the primary reason you're playing the game is mowing down thousands of enemies. So the zombies in Dead Rising 3 are just as lifeless as these human characters populating Paris during the French Revolution, and yet they're much more interesting in Dead Rising 3 because at least they play into the base mechanics, which is zombie slaughtering, whereas in Assassin's Creed it is just window dressing that appears to tank the frame rate.
And that's the thing, is that there are a few instances where those crowds do become useful in terms of being able to evade guards, to hide. Like there's an early mission where you have to do that to get into a palace. You have to use the crowd to kind of get around the guards and hide in plain sight, and that's fine. But it only does that a handful of times throughout the main game, and most of the times you do end up doing it. It's in the other missions, the side missions or the co-op stuff. And it works when they do it. They just don't utilize it enough. It doesn't feel like it's actually there purposefully. It's there, and they find a few ways to use it, but they're way too concerned with just getting you back on the track of doing the usual eavesdropping and typical assassination mission stuff. I feel like there were a lot of ways they could have used that crowd stuff more to their benefit, but like you said, for the most part, it's just window dressing, and it's unfortunate because it felt like there was a lot. When I first popped in that game, when I first got into the main city, I was actually pretty blown away by how lively the world seemed. Like as much as there are repeat, NPCs walking around, and it does, there are definitely some repeating routines there. It's still like just walking around, you'll see people like stumbling out of bars. You'll see them like kind of shouting at each other, fighting, like burning effigies, running around, screaming political slogans, like selling newspapers and stuff. It felt like much more of a living, breathing world than anything they've done before. But your interaction with that world is so slight, and it's so generally meaningless outside of a few mission objectives. And that's the part that really bugged me, was that they just never really found a way to tie that world to most of what you were doing in that game. Like, I know the whole point is that the Assassins and the Brotherhoods sort of exist in this like shadow realm away from like the regular world politics that we all know about. But that doesn't mean that, Arno should just be like this weird ghost that most people don't notice until you're literally shoving them out of the way.
Yeah. I felt they really undersold the context for the world too, right? Like, so this, it takes place in the French Revolution, but I guess you could read the small squares of codex entries that are littered throughout in the guise of newspapers, but if you don't, if you aren't aware of the intricacies of the French Revolution, like why people are upset, why there is rioting in the streets, this just seems like an angry city. The game spends no time sort of setting the stakes for why this is an important moment for France and why it's such a volatile moment for the country, and it just sort of plops you in there. And other than the brief moments that you come across, sort of some rebellion that's occurring in some of the palaces, otherwise you could blink and it looks just like Assassin's Creed 3.
Yeah, and like so later on in the game, they do try to tie more of the historical events to what you're doing, with limited success. Like, for instance, hey, spoilers for French history, the beheading of King Louis takes place in the game, but it just sort of happens, and they don't really give any context for why, like you said, like why this is a meaningful event. You can go into the database and you can read up on all this shit if you really want to, but like the in-game, they don't really frame it in such a way. It feels like another thing that just sort of happens to move the plot along, not like this big, like awe-inspiring moment, of like this huge sea change in the politics of the country. And when they finally get around to like introducing Robespierre, the head of the revolution, who sort of becomes immediately corrupted, he's just another character that shows up for you to track down very quickly, and then once you get to him, he just disappears. Like, that's just the end of him, and then you're off to fight the big bad, who is by far the lamest big bad this series, at least that I've seen this series. I didn't finish 3, so I don't know if the last villain in that game is worse, but man, the guy you're tracking, the guy who is the one behind everything that takes place, what a lame character, and what a lame setup for him.
Yeah, I think there are two things there. One is that what I've always found so interesting about the Assassin's Creed series is that they used a sci-fi conceit to explore historical settings that have largely proven difficult to justify exploring in a video game, right? Like, how are you supposed to justify modeling out the French Revolution unless, to the detail that they do for a AAA game that they're going to spend years and tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, fleshing out, unless it is through an action game that they can guarantee is going to be sold to X number of people. But even once they've done that, that trick is starting to wear a little thin, in which just changing the setting isn't enough, because I think coming along with that, they aren't leveraging those settings in any meaningful way. It at this point is beginning to feel like a palette swap, as opposed to, we chose France and the French Revolution because this is going to provide an interesting cultural context to explore, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't seem to be what's happening anymore. It now appears to be, we have to put out another one of these, so let's spin the wheel. Where do we end up? Okay, I guess we're in France now. And secondly, they seem to have, I guess you can allude to if I'm wrong on this, but abandon all pretense of answering any meaningful questions about where this series is going.
Oh
And
yeah.
even the intro of Assassin's Creed Unity does not touch on any of the bullshit that happened in 3 or 4. 4 didn't even really meaningfully move things along. It just kind of shuffled the cards a little bit. But
But you
3
know what?
has...
Four was a fun diversion from that shit because they had hammered you for so long with that Desmond bullshit that it was kind of nice to see like a sort of weird knowing take on how ridiculous that shit had gotten. Like I loved the stuff with your super passive aggressive manager in that stuff. Like the actual gameplay of like hacking computers or whatever was totally pointless. But I love they went in that direction. With this, it's like it's even more of a standalone thing, and it's even less interesting because anytime it tries to tie you into that real world stuff, it's so half-assed. Like, and the way they tie it up at the end, won't spoil it, won't say what happens, is ludicrously unsatisfying.
There was also something that I saw going around on Twitter that I didn't notice at first, and now that I've noticed it, it's driving me nuts. So this game is set in the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's set in France.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the voiceovers are British.
Yeah, I want to say there was some kind of weird justification for that, but I don't remember what it was. All I know is that it is really weird where every once in a while they will just kind of like blurt out a French phrase and then start talking like super Cockney.
Yeah, what's going on here?
Now, I didn't mind it as much because one of the things I will say about the game is that the voice acting is generally pretty stellar. As much as I don't like the writing, I think the actors do a pretty tremendous job with the material, and I very much I was A-okay with the actors because they did a good job. It's mostly the script I had an issue with, and yeah, the fact that they're all British is a little weird. Not going to say it's not.
It's the kind of detail that I didn't notice till someone pointed it out, and now that it's there, and I hear it, it drives me up the wall. And
yeah.
As I think it was Coldman in the chat, I believe was his username, pointed out, it just sort of points to the kind of the lack of nuance, the lack of attention to detail being paid to the historical context these games are being set in, and only goes to maybe point out the broader idea that it is just this palette swap in which they're setting these new games in, and it's just really disappointing because it's still really it's awesome to get excited about. Wow, a game set during the French Revolution, because there are no other than maybe an adventure game. Like, who's gonna do that? No one's gonna do that. It's either fantastic worlds or like militarized America. Like there are precious few settings that video games explore. And Assassin's Creed, part of the excitement and the promise is that we buy into this ridiculous idea, but in exchange get to explore places to such stunning fidelity that would not be justifiable otherwise. And that's what I find so disappointing about the trajectory of this series, is that it really just is such missed potential as we go forward, and they're just going to change it to another setting, and I'll get mildly interested again. But I feel like, maybe we say this every year with these kinds of series. Like, I feel like this is possibly a tipping point that if next year's game is not some really compelling bounce back, it's going to be really difficult for this series to recover.
I don't know. I mean, we'll see how this one sells.
That is a separate discussion from the critical response. How we feel about it, I think, is different than the commercial response.
I know, but what I'm saying is that how that game sells is ultimately going to decide how they decide to approach it from here on out. Because critical tipping points don't fucking matter to most developers. They only matter insofar as their Metacritic average, I guess. So in this case, if the response to this game is that less people buy it, especially a game that 10 fucking teams worked on, which I assume must have been astronomically expensive. If that game doesn't make its money back, that's maybe what finally kicks them in the ass to maybe start making some changes. What I have to say about this game, what reviewers have to say about this game, doesn't really matter if people are out there still buying it.
Yeah, it's just disappointing. It's profoundly disappointing when a series that was capable of being an incredible experience while also being a successful commercial experience, and then as that series goes on, sheds that because of its inability to change, is just sad to watch, because there just aren't that many of them in which I can get behind them in that way, where it's like, wow, this is doing some really interesting stuff that I can't get anywhere else, and it's benefiting from the blockbuster model. Wow, that's pretty unique. And then as that series goes on, it's incapable of shifting in the ways that it needs to because of the constraints of the blockbuster, in which people come to expect certain things, and I think that handicaps the developers in a way that prevents them from maintaining the viability of the series going forward. You have Watch Dogs as this potential successor, but I can't tell you that I'm particularly excited for Watch Dogs 2.
Yeah, I have a feeling. I have a feeling with Watch Dogs that they probably recognize what went wrong with that game, and I actually feel like, just based on, I mean, again, I have not played Watch Dogs at all, so I am not speaking from personal experience here, but from the things that have been described to me, it sounds like there are things about Watch Dogs that are very fixable. Making the story not dog shit would be a good one. But, like, there are concepts and there are gameplay ideas, and there are things in that game that could be very easily improved on, and because they've only made one of them, it's not like there's not room for them to explore.
Yeah, sure. And Assassin's Creed is a great example of that, in which
there are two this year.
Yeah.
There are two of them this year. They have gotten so far up their own asses with that shit that they really need to just find a good starting over point. Like, that's not what Unity is. Unity doesn't feel like starting over. It feels like treading water.
It would, I'm curious to see what happens, right? Because next E3 will roll around, and we'll be at the time where traditionally they'd be announcing a brand new Assassin's Creed, and there'd be enough time. It'd be a full year had passed since the release of Watch Dogs. A year and a half if you include the original release date that they were shooting for that fall. So Watch Dogs 2 is obviously an active development. Or would they stick to the May-November timeline, or would they consider shifting Watch Dogs to November 2015? And then giving Assassin's Creed a break. My guess is if these all sell just fine, even if they suffer critically, they're going to be pretty interested in maintaining the idea of having year-round blockbusters as opposed to stuffing them all into November.
I mean, I look at what they're talking about releasing next year. Let's assume for a moment that The Division actually makes it out next year. Let's assume that Rainbow Six.
Right.
Let's assume that Rainbow Six makes it out this year. Those are games that they can put out and say, like, here are some big tentpole things. In theory, they could, if they are confident enough in those games, they could use them to offset what they might lose by not, say, having another Assassin's Creed or another Watch Dogs out next year. That said, I don't know that they're going to go that route. I still don't think we're going to see Watch Dogs 2 next year, but that's just a personal feeling. I have nothing to base that off of at all.
I don't know if it necessarily comes out next year.
Well, that's what I mean. I don't think it comes out next year.
Sure, it's possible that's announced, at May 2015 for a, they list it as 2016 and then it comes out spring 2016. That would get them on the, the 2.5 year cycle that a lot of these games are on. But yeah, so you mentioned very briefly before we started, some of the response to your review.
Oh, it's pretty minor. There are some people who've said that maybe my way of going about playing that game was not the correct one. And the thing I'll say about that is that with Assassin's Creed games, I'm always very interested in the idea of playing the assassinations the way that the game wants me to. Taking my time, trying to figure out the best places to sort of hide and sneak up on dudes and do crazy shit to them. But my problem with Unity was that the game never found a way to stop me from just brute forcing my way through everything. Especially once
you just find, as soon as you spot the guy, you can do other things.
Yeah.
What you could just do: get on the ground, go behind him, and stab him, or swing an axe, or shoot a gun.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's even like scenarios where you are surrounded by guards, and you theoretically should try and be stealthy about this because you're going to end up in a bad combat situation immediately afterward, whatever. That's the kind of stuff where that stuff should become more important, being more stealthy, being more mindful of where you are and what's around you. But once you start leveling Arno up in that game, like, it doesn't even matter. Guards just die in like 2 hits. The only thing you really need to worry about are snipers, and you can usually just smoke bomb and dart away from them before they actually shoot you. I know that Assassin's Creed has had this problem in the past where it is incredibly easy to sometimes just brute force your way around it, but like, I always felt it was still more rewarding to sort of push my way through that, and also sometimes there were times, at least the game would challenge me enough in combat to where I felt like, okay, this is a bad situation I'm getting myself into. Let me think about this harder. Unity doesn't really do that. I know that I can go through and do all this, this hardcore stealth shit, but it doesn't even really put up a fight when you don't try to work it that way. And I think that's a flaw. Like, I understand that, there is still a rewarding way to play those kinds of missions. And I went back and I played a bunch of them, and I messed around with them after I, got through the main story. But, like, I don't think that's good game design when you can't even, like, say, hey, maybe you should try this a different way and have that feel meaningful at all. Like, it just really doesn't in that game. And it's only in, like, the last few missions where I felt like it really started to click in that way, where the things you were doing were complicated enough that you needed to actually be mindful of your surroundings and pay attention to the circumstances that you were presented with. Otherwise, it was real easy just to kind of run in there, shank dude, run away, stab a bunch of guys, throw a few smoke bombs, and just come out clean. No issues.
Yeah, I did appreciate that. This game introduces what they sort of call side objectives into the main assassination missions, in which you are assigned a target, and then you'll find that you kind of move into the area. There's the green sort of spot on your map that lets you know, okay, here's the boundary box. Here's the spot that you're playing in the world. You put on eagle vision. You spot the guy in gold. He's okay. He's my target, and he starts walking around and doing stuff. But then these side objectives pop up, in which you can influence how the mission plays out to your advantage by engaging with these side missions. So, for example, this early one that I did involved going after someone in the sewers. So you start above level, and then one of them is clogging up two vents on the surface, and then another was engaging with some beggars who were fighting with a bunch of guards. The thing that I like that idea in theory, except that what happens is, and maybe you can illuminate if this changes throughout the rest of the game, but that I would engage in the side objective not knowing what I'd actually unlocked or what it did. The game would introduce, hey, you should go maybe do these other things, but then it wouldn't be till much later in the mission that I realized, oh, okay, I helped the beggars. That means they're going to distract the guards. Oh, okay, I plugged these vents. That means that there's steam and smoke all throughout the sewer, so I can get around easier. But none of that's communicated up front, so it's presented as do these side objectives because, come on, it's a video game, do the side objectives, as opposed to how would you like your strategy to play out? What exactly would you like to go into this assassination? Do you want to engage with the beggars? And because they might actually, I feel like there's a way that this game can modify the assassination setup to give you a lot more options that have advantages and disadvantages, because what they did here was just put in more choices that are all just advantages, and I don't know if they actually ended up being particularly great advantages. They were more just things you could do prior to engaging in the traditional look for a spot to just assassinate the dude and move on with your life.
Yeah, that's it. The game is really weird about the stuff it does and doesn't communicate to you. I had issues with that for a while where, like, I would be like, oh, cool, I just set up this distraction, and then I had no idea how to actually make that meaningful or actually work within the context.
Like, what does it do? Like, so the beggars, you are kind of walking your way towards the assassination target, and then some beggars get in a scrap with the guards, and it says, hey, help the beggars. And I'm like, why would I why would I do that? But you do it because there are icons on the screen that says kill, so I kill the guys. And then it says, cool, you help the beggars. But then the beggars just stand there. Like, you don't have a conversation with one of them that then says, hey, thanks for the help, dude. We're going to help you. Are you going after that creepy dude? We got you, bro. Like, there is nothing communicated to the player to instruct them on, you did X, which will result in Y. You just do X because the game says do X, and then you assume something might happen.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the game is constantly yelling at you to spend your upgrade points, even when you're trying to save them, and there's actually no upgrades that you can afford.
Oh my God! I wrote this down in my notebook last night because yes,
It will not shut up about that.
I have 1 point to upgrade my character. There are no options to upgrade for 1 point just to get the menu to go away.
Nope.
It pops up like every 90 seconds.
Yep.
or at least it feels like every 90 seconds. Constantly
Well,
telling
it's
you,
very often.
spend those points. Spend them. Spend them. I can't spend them.
And once you do those theater missions and the money starts piling up, you start getting those prompts constantly like, "Hey, your chest is full. You should go get this money. Hey, your chest is full. You should go get this money."
What?
Yeah. So
in that game, this is another one. This is right next to. I wrote this down also because it was driving me nuts. So one of the side missions in Unity is that since Brotherhood, the game has incorporated some concept of building up. And 3 was a homestead. In Brotherhood, you have a villa. There's some idea of like you're pouring money into a thing which then spits out more money. It's in Brotherhood you were buying banks and things like that. So in Unity you have this theater that you are reviving, and then you're buying theaters around the city, and all of that is creating an economy that basically means, hey, don't look for those silly chests anymore. You're just getting money all the time, and you can buy whatever you want, and the economy breaks in the first 5 hours of the game. But the money just doesn't go into your account. The money goes into this green chest in the theater on a far side of the map that if you want to collect the money, you have to go open the chest and collect it. And then once
you can fast travel there.
And then once you've done that, because you hit a currency cap, for whatever reason, your theaters just stop collecting money. They just say, you know what, we hit 3. What's the currency? The French currency? I don't know. I have no idea.
It was francs at the time.
Francs?
Yeah.
So we've hit 3,000 francs. We're just going to stop collecting money unless you come over here, collect it out of the bank or out of the little chest, and then it starts over again, and a timer ticks down, and it collects money again. But you can be on the other side of the map, engaging in missions, having a great time. You hit a currency cap, which means you then have to jump to the menu, go back to the theater, run halfway through the theater, open up the box, collect your money, run back to the objective you're middle. It's just, why can't it just get deposited?
I don't know. You know what, Patrick? We should probably move on from this game. We should just stop talking about it. It's a real bummer. The review's up on the site. Go read it if you want. I don't want to talk about Unity anymore. There's other games. There's other games coming out. I am to understand. There's this other Assassin's Creed game, which I've heard from some people is better than Unity. I don't know. I've got this wrestling game. Look, pro wrestling, pro graps. Woo!
Can you talk about WWE?
No, I can't. That is Tuesday at midnight embargo, so we'll be able to talk about that next week, but not yet.
Okay. But you have the Xbox One, PS4?
Xbox One is the one they sent me, so.
Interesting. So I assume you have not played anything else this week, just Assassin's Creed.
No. Up until yesterday, I had not touched anything other than AC. Have you hopefully had the ability to play some other games?
Yeah. So obviously, as the fall season gets underway, some games start to fall through the cracks, and one of the things that I try to do is find those games that fall through the cracks and save them, give them a hug. One of those that I've been kind of poking around at is Valkyria Chronicles. Which was recently released on Steam as a PS3 cult classic strategy series. It has a lot of similarities to Fire Emblem, although the way you control the characters is in third person. But if you've played a Fire Emblem game, you're gonna feel kind of at home with Valkyria Chronicles. But seemingly out of nowhere, there was a petition by some users to get Valkyria Chronicles on PC, but hey, there are petitions all the time that don't result in just about anything. But for whatever reason, Sega decided to listen to this one, or at least it influenced them in some way about their PC initiative, and it showed up this week. And I guess up front, it's an excellent port. A lot of graphical customization options. There is a wonderful analysis by Durante, who is known at this point for saving all sorts of crappy PC ports, Dark Souls, Deadly Premonition, and some other games. Basically a lot of console to PC ports that don't come with the right resolution options and things like that. Durante, as he is known, has gone in and fixed that stuff for us. He did an analysis over at PC Gamer, which I assume is going to be part of a series in which he looks at ports to the PC and lets you know if they're worth a damn. And he said this one is worth a damn, so I trust his opinion. And yeah, so I played about 2 hours of Valkyria Chronicles because I'm going to try and do a quick look solo of that today so that folks that aren't familiar with that series can get a sense of what's going into it. But yeah, if you like XCOM, if you like Fire Emblem, if you like these sort of strategy light is probably the wrong way to think of it, but it's on the other end of the spectrum of a, I don't know, like you're controlling one unit at a time. Like it's a much more manageable strategy experience than I think some other games. If you like those sorts of stuff, and it's all wrapped up in a anime package, so that part is sort of neither here nor there. But the strategy part of it is excellent.
Cool. Yeah, I've heard a ton of great things about that game over the years. It is not one that I've ever really experienced because those are just not games that I tend to dig into. But seeing how fervent the response was over them actually putting out this PC port, and then seeing Sega put out that press release, like we were incredibly surprised by the response to this release and all this other kind of shit. Like it seems like it's kind of a big deal to a lot of people, which I would not have guessed it would be going into it, because usually when these like late PC ports come around, it's not like everyone just kind of casually shrugs like, oh, well, okay. But this seems like something people really wanted for a really long time. Is there a reason for that? Is there a reason why people really wanted it on this particular platform?
Well, it was kind of stuck on PS3. As far as I know, it's not available on PSN. It's not something you could like pick up for your PS4. It was only released on the PS3. There was a sequel, I believe, also released on the PS3, and then a PSP exclusive third game, I believe, which is extremely rare and hard to come by. So I think it's just one of those games that not a lot of people played. The people that played loved it, and there was a strong desire for it to show up on a platform that was more accessible, and that's the PC. I think it's an encouraging sign that Sega took a chance on porting this game, and then players responded with, hell yeah, we're excited about this. And it's different than Nintendo putting out Super Mario 3 for the umpteenth time and not providing any tangible benefit. This is a game that otherwise was stuck to an old piece of Sony hardware that most people are putting into a closet, as opposed to a PC that is sort of evergreen. In 10 years, theoretically, this game will still be playable in a way that Valkyria Chronicles is not playable on the console hardware that we choose to buy and play on. And hopefully it encourages Sega to think seriously about doing additional PC ports. Not just another Valkyria Chronicles. Maybe they'll go down that series and kind of clean it up for the PC to reward those fans. But why wouldn't they do Skies of Arcadia or Shenmue or things like that? Maybe those games are a little bit harder because they're a little bit older. But I think when Yu Suzuki and Sega talk about wanting to do another Shenmue and things like that, like the way you potentially justify that is like putting it out into the world and seeing how people respond, as opposed to just wondering, I wonder, maybe people should do because fan petitions don't amount to anything. Fan petitions are just a promise to spend money that's not a contract, as opposed to Steam, which is currently on the top sellers list and beating out games like Assassin's Creed Unity, which goes to it costs less than Unity, so Sega's making less on a per unit basis, but it shows fans are psyched and they want to show their support, and you hope that translates into additional games down the line.
I'm also just imagining the amount of money they spent on that port versus what Ubisoft spent on Unity, and I'm imagining the difference between like Mercury and Jupiter.
Well, Sega has just this incredible library to take advantage of, right? Sega has done an exceptionally poor job of capitalizing on its golden years as it's transitioned into sort of the modern age in which it does.
What are you talking about? Sonic the Hedgehog has never been more popular.
I don't even mean that. I don't even mean it's.
I'm joking.
That's if anyone has not seen the Sonic Boom playthrough in which they glitch through the game in less than an hour and the game's only been out for a couple days, feel free to look that up. It's entertaining for about 5 minutes because the glitch involves pausing the game over and over, but that game is a mess. That series is a mess, and I feel bad for Sonic fans that are still holding out to hope that Sega's going to figure it out. But
I've stopped because at a certain point you're just watching masochism take place, and you can only pity that for so long.
Exactly. But Sega, yes, has done an exceptionally poor job of utilizing series and characters and franchises that people love and making new entries. But they've done an equally poor job of capitalizing on the older games in any meaningful way. They just kind of sit and collect dust and don't do a whole lot. But I think the Valkyria Chronicles sales and support points to this idea that there's a very vocal, hungry fan base that is willing to spend their money. Like if they announce Panzer Dragoon Saga coming to Steam, like fuck yeah, like who wouldn't be into that? I think there's a ripe market for that, and I hope it means that they kind of go down that path, because I think there's a lot of games from the Saturn era, from the Dreamcast era, that people didn't play, and that would be interested in playing them going forward.
Hopefully one of them is never Shenmue.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I'm just being a dick. I don't even hate Shenmue that much.
Shenmue. You hate Shenmue.
Shenmue is fantastic. Shenmue, on the other hand,
Yeah, I own multiple copies of Shenmue for the Dreamcast and never played it. I imported it for some stupid reason. I bought the US version for some stupid reason. I've never played that series. But
yeah. I mean, I played some Shenmue. I eventually got kind of bored with it and just stopped, and I have not really gone back to it since. I've never touched Shenmue 2, so yeah.
Well, Shenmue 2 doesn't want you to touch it either. All right.
Okay.
So
I don't
Shenmue 2.
I will abide by the court's restraining order.
So those are the two games that I've been playing this week. I've been kind of putzing around a little bit with Binding of Isaac Rebirth, but that's sort of just a game I will always be playing probably for the remainder of the year, as opposed to one I sink any real significant time into for something to talk about. Still enjoying it. I have not messed with the sync stuff, which apparently they have worked out, but I am told that it is in a better shape than it was before. All right, so there's some news this week. One of which, I know you didn't want to talk about Assassin's Creed Unity anymore, but that game is a glitchy mess. It is, it's one of those things that you may not personally encounter a lot of what's wrong with that game, but when it goes out into the world and is being played by millions, it becomes incredibly apparent how many sort of holes there are in that game.
Yes, there are a ton of holes in that game.
I really enjoy the flesh monster glitches, though.
So I got that once when I tried to... So I only saw that on PC, and I didn't end up reviewing the PC version because I straight up could not get it to run properly on my machine, but when I got it to load on my computer briefly, first cutscene that popped up, I got one of those flesh monsters, and then once it dropped into the game, the whole thing just basically went to shit. So I'm probably never going to review the PC version of that because it just does not run here. It ran actually weirdly fine on our work PC, which is extremely well endowed, I guess.
Is it is the PC one an NVIDIA card?
I want to say yes.
That could be a huge part of it. The ATI cards are.
But I think I have an NVIDIA card too. It's
just really? One.
But yeah, it got a. That version has some problems.
Yeah. So yeah, they've promised they're putting out a patch, to fix things like Arno falling through the ground, Arno getting caught inside hay carts, frame rate issues, graphical and collision issues, Helix credits issues, because people are just demanding more chances and opportunities to engage in that game's egregious microtransaction options, such as paying $100 for Helix credits.
Well, apparently the patch for the microtransactions has already gone up.
Oh, great.
That was the first thing they put out.
That is fantastic news. Glad that Ubisoft is... whatever. That's a server-side issue that is fixed relatively easy, as
I would guess, yeah. It's a lot easier than the actual game code.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much stock you want to put into the news that on the launch of Unity, Ubisoft's stock price went down 9%. That was coincided with poor reviews, lots of issues of glitches, criticisms of the way they handled the embargo, which according to a BBC story, quoting a Ubisoft spokesperson, they are considering walking back, which combined with Kotaku, certainly one of the leading publications saying they would no longer accept games or would review games that came with embargoes that went past the time in which players could purchase the game. You've seen several outlets or several publishers modify their embargoes to kind of fall within those parameters. So, hopefully those are things to take to heart about the future and and hopefully Ubisoft will fix that stuff soon, because it has been a bad week for games not running properly.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, you have the Halo the Master Chief Collection. I haven't checked this morning, but all week long it has had severe matchmaking issues, and this is a collection in which one of the primary reasons people are buying it is to play co-op and multiplayer with their friends and frenemies and randos, and they have not been able to do that. To the point where I think even in our quick look, it's demonstrated. People are having trouble waiting excess of 15 minutes where no match is found, and that is just completely unacceptable.
Yeah, man. I'm kind of blown away by just how consistent this year's current gen releases have been in terms of their just kind of lacking functionality. Like
Drive Club is still broken.
Drive Club's still broken. NBA 2K has gotten better, but at launch was really broken and still has some problems. Like, this has been an ongoing thing. I don't think that we have heard the last of the games that have like broke-ass issues for this year, and that is crazy to me. And it is such. Everyone says that there's the ongoing discussion that this generation for some reason came too soon, or it came before developers were really ready to get these games out there, which is nuts when you consider the fact that it was like 8 years that the last console generation went on.
Plus matchmaking, if we're potentially in Assassin's Creed, you could look at that as, well, they're new technology, new hardware, blah blah blah. Like they're, it doesn't excuse it by any stretch of the imagination, but you can start to see how that stuff adds up potentially for a game that was rushed out the door, delayed by a couple of weeks at the last second. Like, obviously this game came in as hot as possible, but not to say a lot of technical work didn't go into Halo the Master Chief Collection, but matchmaking is something we figured out. And in fact, the Halo series was one of the defining moments for figuring out, modern online multiplayer matchmaking. So that's like, that stuff hasn't significantly changed with new hardware. That is just botched. And it's not just 1 day or 2 days. We're multiple days into this game's release, and a fundamental aspect of how people play it is largely unplayable, and they are now removing certain playlists and options to make sure that more matches sync up together, which, if they took away the one you like, that's probably frustrating, and it just doesn't seem to have a great explanation other than, well, we had to hit this release date. Sorry, you paid $60 and expected something to work, but it didn't. And I think one of the common arguments that comes up is, well, don't pre-order games, don't buy them at launch. And while I do think that is sound advice, if to take into account, that does not excuse publishers for shipping fundamentally broken products that you pay $60 for, and then have to wait for that stuff to get fixed and worked out. People that potentially took a day off work in order to enjoy maybe their most anticipated game of the year, and then they run into issues that don't allow them to do that. I mean, it puts consumers in a bind, because the best way to communicate that message that this is unacceptable is to not buy it. But if it's the game that you've been looking forward to all year, of course you want to play it on day one. So it's one of those where the consumer has the power, but they also are put into the situation where they're supposed to actively distance themselves from the thing they're very excited about. And in no other medium would you hear, don't read that book on week one. Don't see that movie on week one. Games are different beasts, so that is certainly part of it. But it's one of those things that is becoming increasingly common this fall. That is, it's just not acceptable.
And someone in the chat just made the salient point. A game like Destiny, which was all about the online and very intense in that regard, pretty much worked right out of the box. Like there were a couple of hiccups here and there early in the launch, as I recall. Like, there were a few hour-long stretches where I couldn't log in, but by and large, that game has worked as intended. Maybe don't follow some of Destiny's design choices, but maybe look to that as an example of maybe how to do a launch pretty much right.
Yeah, who knows how much of that was them doing very public alphas and betas, even though calling it an alpha and a beta was perhaps disingenuous to what the terms alpha and beta actually mean, but it got the point across of what they were attempting to do, which was stress test and balance that game to some degree ahead of the time. For hard to know exactly how much that played into it, but this is contrasted against games that didn't do that, and they've had really really rough launches as a result. It's just incredibly frustrating, I imagine.
It's super disheartening, and it comes across like, whether this is intended or not, it just comes across like like a non-effort. Like I have to imagine all these games went through exhaustive QA processes, because if I imagine that they didn't, I get really sad.
No, and sure they, and it's like, for example, like the Assassin's Creed stuff. By and large, those glitches were not reported in reviews, because when you're talking about reviews, you're speaking to the experience of what, at most, a couple hundred people, maybe a couple thousand people, if we're to like extend it out to let's play deals and things like that. It's a very small slice in which people who review games or cover them for all sorts of different purposes are not giving it the rigorous stress test, and it's just not enough of a use case. So when it happens in with millions of people, that stuff pops up and you get viral images that demonstrate the problems of the game. But yeah, I'm sure they pass a QA test, but stress tests of the magnitude of millions is something completely different. But it's that combined with these these crazy day one patches. I think Halo the Master Chief Collection had something like a 15 gig day one patch, and I don't know about you, but I've had the complete flip on download speeds this generation, in which the PS4 downloads stuff at a pretty fast clip, and the Xbox One seems to take forever.
I've been having that experience as well. Yes, 100%.
I can't really explain it. Both of them are on wireless.
Like neither, I would not call either super fast, but I would say that Sony's has been more reliable for me and generally quicker.
Yeah, and I noticed that when I downloaded Sunset Overdrive. Like I set it up, maybe an hour before I was finishing work, and I was like, cool, I'll set that for an hour. I'll jump into it, because it'll finish like partial download, and then you can just jump into the parts of the game ahead of time. And I had to wait another hour because it was just clipping along at just such an incredibly slow pace that did not seem. It's certainly not consistent with what my internet is capable of, because it's capable of downloading and uploading, much faster than these machines were implying. But the PS4 traditionally has been, yeah. As someone in the chat points out, Steam's faster than all of them. It's like, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Steam, I download it. I can download a 40 gig game in about 20 minutes. And that is definitely not the case on either console. But
I've had good experiences in general with Nintendo's online service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
been pretty consistent.
I'd point people to. So there's a Eurogamer piece. I don't know if a Digital Foundry did it or not, because they're part of Eurogamer, but it was a Eurogamer technical piece in which they showed you what The Evil Within looked like without its day one patch. And it's monstrous. Like, it is an unplayable mess. Because what's happening a lot here is that games go gold, they pass QA, in which they are technically playable, right? Like, they're not failing these relatively low bars, which is just that you can play the game. But like frame rate optimization, all sorts of other problems are ironed out in that period between the discs getting pressed and the game going live. Like, that essentially be where it used to be, the game shipped and then marketing took over during that period. Now development continues in the result of a day one patch. And if you play some of these games without them, I mean, you cannot even justify that those are the games that you should be paying for.
Yeah.
It's weird. I understand why developers and publishers take advantage of that period, but it does feel like we have now gotten to a point where things are getting crunched into that spot, and they are not even resulting in. It's not like the day one patch results in these polished products that, okay, great, well, you figured it out in that interim period. It's just they're still hot messes, and they would have been broken, unassailable, like complete flaming pieces of garbage without even that day one patch.
And that's not just on the publishers and developers. Like, that's on the console makers too, because those things have to go through like standards tests through those companies. They have to Microsoft, Sony, they have to sign off on those games before they go live. So they are being complicit in this in saying that, okay, well, as long as this day one patch addresses everything about this that is horrible, that's fine. Like, they are allowing day one patches to be baked into the development cycle that way. And I think that's a really shitty precedent. And I don't like that that has become the norm, that every game has one of these patches, and they are usually like fairly fundamental things that fix them. And I, everything you just said pretty much, but it's especially distressing to me because it says to me that they are very willing, like, that this is all sides of development that are willing to let this happen, and that is the most distressing part for me.
Yeah. 1 year later, after it was promised it was coming soon, Grand Theft Auto 5 is finally getting online heists.
Terrific.
Part of a update to Grand Theft Auto Online that is coming after the launch of the Xbox One and PS4 versions. The PC one comes, I believe, in January. But there will be an update to GTA Online, the multiplayer component to GTA 5, in which the online heists, which are supposed to take the, I think, largely agreed upon, the most exciting part of GTA 5, however you felt about that game. The heists were really interesting and dynamic, and the players had some. I really liked them. Every time you finished one, you wish there was another one around the corner, and there were only a couple of them in the game. And the idea of playing a heist online with your friends, of course, that sounds cool.
Right. It's why Payday was a game that people played, because the idea behind it was really strong.
Totally. And that was promised soon. We are 365 days later, basically. Well, I guess more than that, because didn't GTA launch in September?
It's September, yeah.
More than a year later. And so my headline is incorrect. I apologize for that mistake. More than a year later, heists are still coming soon. I don't blame people for not really believing them. That is kind of egregious. It wouldn't surprise me if heists actually are done, and then they just realized the best time to roll them out would be when they're putting out these new platform versions, and to try and encourage interest all over again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is both cynical and probably pragmatic on Rockstar's part, but it's also disappointing that they're coming to the 360 and PS3 versions, but to stick around for a full year for what was a flagship feature for that mode is, I don't know how you can color that as anything but disappointing.
My hope, and I mean this doesn't make up for this, but my hope is that when they realized they were already going to be super late on that, they were like, look, let's just take our time. Let's actually make a bunch of these. Let's make this into like a really compelling package of heists that people can play through, and not just however many we can like bang out quickly just to get them out there. We'll see if that is the case or not, but that is my hope. Like, that is the only thing that would make it a little more okay. It's still not really that acceptable. They've been promising this for over a year, but I'm hoping that when they do launch, like, there is a compelling number of those to play through, and that they are like well designed and good. Because honestly, in the in-game ones, like, there were only a handful of them, and only 2 of them were really good.
Yeah, in concept they're great, and certainly the execution, you could question, but I enjoyed those probably some of the most out of any of the missions in Grand Theft Auto 5. So the prospect of playing that with friends sounds super cool. I say it sounds super cool, and then I'll never do it, but I can look at an idea in paper and say that sounds all right. And that sounds all right. And what's not all right is waiting more than a full year.
Yeah.
For a feature you ostensibly paid.
Said was going to come pretty close after launch originally.
Yeah. Telltale put out, I'm not sure if you watched it, a sort of like full fleshed out trailer for Tales from the Borderlands, which they promise is coming very soon. And from what I have heard, that is not off the mark. People can expect that we'll know a lot more about that pretty soon. It looks all right. It looks more interesting seeing it fleshed out with characters and a potential arc than what it's been up until now, which is, hey, do you want to play an adventure game set in the Borderlands universe? Which my response is, no.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I saw that game at E3, and
okay.
And what I saw of it was funny. It didn't seem spectacular, but it was funny, and everyone makes the joke about Borderlands 2 being nothing but memes. I didn't see any meme jokes in that, so take that for whatever it's worth. it seemed fine. It seemed like they had found a way to take some characters, plop them down in the middle of that universe, and just write a comedy game around that, which is fine. Again, I just don't know if I care enough about the Borderlands universe to really want to dig in that far into it.
Yeah, they put out some ideas on that Game of Thrones game, which I haven't read the books. I don't really know. I'm sure maybe people
This
are
is based on
excited.
the TV series anyway, right?
Well, sure, but when Telltale put out like the details, they're like, oh, this kind of takes place in this frame of the books and is referenced here. Like it's not the game is going to explore something tangential to the series, both in framed of in the framing of the book and the television series. It's not like, oh, we're picking up on these main characters and we're gonna go see what they're up to over here. So I don't know. I mean, the artwork for that suggests to me it could be like a rapid departure from what Telltale's done in the past. And Job, who is their PR guy, teased on Twitter at some point that he played a game that kind of looks like a painting. Which if they're going for something that drastically different, I'm super curious to see what exactly that ends up looking like.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm curious anyway because as someone who is a fairly big fan of the TV series, I'm totally down for anything that will like flesh out that universe. I thought about buying that giant ass textbook thing that they just put out for the books. That's like the whole like universe sort of fleshed out encyclopedia thing. Like, and I haven't really read the books at all. So, but I would still like to read that stuff because I am totally fascinated by the weird backstory going on in that world.
One of the cool things is if you watch Game of Thrones on HBO Go, when I don't know if it's like when they actually air it, it must be like the archive version they put up, but you can sync like the iPad app or the iPhone app with the episode, and as you're watching the episode, there are there's a map, and the map moves along the world, like, oh, hey, this scene takes place here. So I find that's always like the hardest part about that series is just I have no sense of the geography whatsoever because it's just jumping around so much and people are always dying and blah blah blah. So I have trouble wrapping my head. I'm just fine with sort of like the surface level character drama and stuff like that, and that's okay for me. But the HBO Go app does like this really fantastic job if you like are rewatching it for like the upcoming season of helping you frame what's going on, like where's this and like in regards to that, and you can click on characters and get like bios, like, oh, this is who this. It's pretty well done. So I recommend that if you wanted to like rewatch the episodes while also getting a little bit out of what you might get out of a sort of encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Bloodborne. Maybe we talked about that. I guess Bloodborne delayed until.
I don't think we talked about it, but it's like a month though, right? That's it.
Yeah. I'm still very excited for that. I'm okay if it's delayed a little bit. There's a lot of games coming out in March. Bloodborne getting delayed means that hopefully I will actually get to play The Witcher 3 to my satisfaction. Is how I kind of look at that news. And they can take their time. I don't mind them taking their time in that. The credits for Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham, in which, as I remarked in my story, would there have been 3 of these? So somehow I blinked and there were 3 Lego Batmans.
That happened.
I don't know how that happened, but in the credits, they tease a dinosaur with the Jurassic Park theme, and there has been previous evidence from Jurassic Park fan sites that Universal is planning a Lego Jurassic Park game, which I have not played one of those in a long time, but I think a Jurassic Park game would get me back in.
I am not nearly the Jurassic Park fan that you are. I love the first movie. I love it to death. But that said, I would at very least be curious to see how they would approach that. I think that is something you could do very cute and very fun. I also... Do the kids know about Jurassic Park? Are the kids into Jurassic Park these days?
Kids are into dinosaurs still. I think dinosaurs are still cool.
Yeah, so that's okay. That's fair.
I don't know about the reverence for Jurassic Park specifically. Like, you can understand why they did Lord of the Rings, even though we're kind of a little bit ways out from that original Peter Jackson trilogy, because, hey, he's putting out the Hobbit movies, so yeah, sure, that makes sense. But, yeah, I mean, Jurassic Park, I mean, Has it
But there
been
aren't like a
20?
bunch of kids out there dressing up like Jeff Goldblum for Christmas or for Halloween. Like that's not how it, like there isn't that like kid level obsession with that movie the way there was when it came out.
I don't know. I mean, we're 20 years removed.
I know.
The movie came out in 1993. We are 21 years, almost 22 years removed from Jurassic Park. And Jurassic Park 3 came out in 2001. So, even the last entry, is more than, 10 years ago. So, obviously there's going to be a big push with, the Jurassic Park or Jurassic World, excuse me, coming out next year, which I'm cautiously optimistic about. We don't know much about it. I've avoided all of the spoilers about it. I know the general premise, but I have avoided, if there's Jurassic Park, a new Jurassic Park is like the new Star Wars to other people. I'm excited for the new Star Wars, sure, but the prospect of a new Jurassic Park is Jurassic Park was my Star Wars, probably.
Sure.
It is the game, the film that defined so much of my childhood and a lot of my interests. I came late to Ghostbusters and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, that stuff was still around and I was into it, but it was sort of after like the main pop culture hype, and it was like more you were riding the wave of the cartoons and all the spin-offs that tried to maintain those series as opposed to sort of the pillar that established it in the first place. But Jurassic Park was, I mean, I saw that movie more than 10 times in the theater.
Yeah.
That used to be when my mom was like, hey, what do you want to do today? She would just drop me off to go see Jurassic Park, and then she'd go shop. And she'd just pick me up when the movie was over.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I fucking love Jurassic Park, and I still love that movie. And Lost World holds up better than people give it credit for. I loathed that movie for a long time, including my first viewing of it in the theater, in which I was old enough to understand this movie sucks. But it's actually, there are various elements of that film that are tremendously strong, that you realize, all right, this movie was directed by Steven Spielberg. It's working off kind of a weak script, and some of the characters aren't that great, but there's some pretty fantastic stuff in The Lost World.
There is. There are some moments. The less said about Jurassic Park 3, the better.
Yeah, not that great. At least Sam Neill's in it, but who's in? Tay Leone.
Oh man, and William H. Macy.
I don't know. William H. Macy is just, he's so bad he's good in that film. Like, I think if you view Jurassic Park,
he's like 3, a man who doesn't know why he's there.
Yeah, if you view Jurassic Park 3 through the lens of camp, if you just sort of like lower your expectations for what it should be, I think you can enjoy Jurassic Park 3 to some degree. But it's not, it sits in the shadow of that first film as all of them do. And I'm curious to see what that new one does. We have to imagine we're close to a trailer, given that movie comes out next summer. So, if you've not seen, I'm not sure how to pronounce that guy's name. Colin Trevorrow, the director of Jurassic World. Anyway, he did a little sci-fi film called Safety Not Guaranteed that is fantastic. I think it's on Netflix. I recommend checking it out. But
I will.
It's little stuff we can just, I'm not sure if it's getting a debate about this stuff that happened with Monument Valley, in which they decided to offer DLC, and because they're a mobile game, people were like, you can't do that. And
yeah, I have nothing to say other than, pay for games. If you like the game,
Monument Valley is great.
You can still play the main game for free. They just added some levels for like $2, for God's sakes.
$2. And then Kirby and the Rainbow Curse comes out for the Wii U on February 13th. Which
Yay!
I'm really excited about. Also, now that we've, without getting into details of our internal decisions, we're starting to coalesce around, planning for Game of the Year and things like that. Captain Toad, is that what that's called? Captain Toad, Captain
Toad's Adventure.
Toad Tracker, Captain Toad's Treasure. Yeah, Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. And that comes out the first week of December, and we need to have a conversation with Nintendo. Hey, I'm pretty sure I'm going to love this game.
We want to have a conversation. We want to be able to have a meaningful conversation about Captain Toad.
Yeah, so we need to look into that. But So what are you doing anything this weekend? No, not going to play Assassin's Creed, I would expect.
Well, no, I'm probably going to play at least a little bit of Assassin's Creed, because I'm thinking I might try and review Rogue. We'll see. I would like to because I've heard better things about it at least. But mostly I'm going to be playing this because I got to try and get that done before the embargo. So I'll have those. I do plan to spend a little more time with Bayonetta, which is rapidly climbing my Game of the Year top 10 list right now.
Ooh, okay.
That game is super good, man. You should play it. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I got on the docket. What do you got coming up?
I'm gonna pluck through more of Assassin's Creed. I don't know if I'm gonna dedicate myself to finishing it before I move on to something else, but I have my sights set on Dragon Age Inquisition, which comes out next week. And there's some reviews are hitting for Far Cry 4. I'm interested in playing that game, but I feel like when I start to think of it in the context of our site, like, I know a lot of people will probably play Far Cry 4. Less people are going to play Dragon Age Inquisition, and I'm interested in Dragon Age Inquisition, so I want to focus my attention there. So some folks sent along a handful handy links to something called the Dragon Age Keep, in which it walks you through the major decisions of Dragon Age 1 and 2 to generate a save file for Dragon Age Inquisition, so that you can go into that game feeling like, okay, I didn't play the first 2 games, but I have context for some of the major stuff that happened and then impacts this character, and I can jump right into Inquisition feeling some ownership over that world and the characters, combined with there's an article from Kirk Hamilton over at Kotaku in which he writes, basically, here's a primer for the Dragon Age universe. Here are the characters, the main story beats. Here's what this series calls an orc. Things like that sort of get you in the mindset of what Dragon Age and its world is all about, which I know nothing about. I couldn't even tell you the world that it takes place in. But so I'm going to read up on that stuff this weekend, get myself prepped for Inquisition, because that's sort of there's no way I'm going to finish that game before we get to Game of the Year, so I want to try and put in 20, 30 hours before we get there, in the hopes of at least like being able to settle on, here's kind of how I feel about it, here's where I think it's going, even if I can't quite get the end credits to roll, given that the couple of reviews I read said that if you engage with the main story and a decent chunk of the side quests as a normal person would through an adventure like that, you're looking at Skyrim level, 70, 80 hours to get through that, which is, so that's gonna, that's easily gonna get me through.
That's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen before I go out to California. That's not gonna happen.
No. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of get caught up on that stuff. But yeah, it appears, based on what you've said and some other people have alluded to in conversations in private, is that Bayonetta 2 needs to be a game that I need to play. So maybe I need to find time for that. I don't. Please tell me where that time is. I'm not sure where it is as November rapidly depletes, but I do need to find some time for that. So I will have to try and make do with what I can. I suppose I'm aided by the fact that the Chicago Bears season is rapidly becoming not interesting. So maybe my Sundays are going to free up a little bit in terms of what I have to dedicate to watching things on Sunday. But we will be back on a Monday with another morning show. We'll play some games this weekend. We'll come back. We'll take your questions. I'll go ahead and open up my Tumblr account after we close this morning show. So if you don't have a Tumblr account, you can ask me anonymous questions at patrickklepek.tumblr.com, and we'll try and answer a chunk of those on Monday's show. But until then, Alex, I'll talk to you on Monday.
Oh.